Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on weird and mysterious stories. Tonight's story is all about a small town and a perceptive mind. Always trust your gut. Written by Small Town Throwaway 01. I live in a small rural community in eastern US. It's a nice little town. Because of my work in the medical field, I've met some interesting folks. I'm also familiar with law enforcement and emergency personnel. Small town life is not as dull and uneventful as people think, especially since everybody knows somebody who knows somebody. I have a lot of stories to share, but since this one just happened, I'll start here. Because it's still very recent and the investigation is ongoing, I have to be vague with some details, but I needed to tell someone. I'm single and live alone. Due to a stalker, I've moved twice. But that's another story for another time. However, it is relevant for this story for multiple reasons. The first reason being that I have a dog for the sake of protection, as well as I have motion sensors and outdoor security cameras. The second reason being the location of my home, which is literally down the street from the fire department. I can see it from my living room window, and a couple blocks from the police station. However, next to the fire department is a road department, which is basically a parking lot where they park their road equipment and empty garbage trucks at night and on weekends. Oddly, it doesn't have a security camera. Small town life, I suppose. My house sits on a hill with a good view of that side of the street. Due to the incline, the large trees in my front yard, and the half cornfield on the property next to me, most people on the street below wouldn't notice me in the backyard unless they were actively looking. However, I can see the street clearly. This incident happened Saturday evening. The county was holding its annual Independence Day spiel with a community barbecue, music, fireworks, etc. I did not attend because it's just not my thing. Plus I have a dog and the sound of fireworks could be traumatizing. Before the big show, I took the dog out to relieve herself in the backyard. There was still at least an hour of daylight left, but the entire neighborhood was pretty quiet because most everyone was at the fairgrounds or various other holiday events. So when an unfamiliar, large, white pickup truck drove slowly down the street, I noticed. It must have turned around at the end of the street because I saw it again, moving in the opposite direction, only about 20 seconds later. This time, it turned into the parking lot of the road department. Now, people have been known to toss things into the empty garbage trucks, usually at night to avoid getting caught, because they don't want to or are unable to make the trip to the landfill themselves. Usually it's things like furniture or broken equipment, but I didn't see any of those things in the back of this truck. The driver was a somewhat stocky guy of average height. He took 3 large black trash bags from the bed of his truck and tossed them one by one into the hopper of the garbage truck. Then he left. Now I swear, I'm not one of those meddling rear window types who always thinks activity is suspicious and that their neighbors are up to no good. But something about this didn't sit right with me. Normally, when I see people tossing their garbage into the trucks and leaving, I don't bother reporting it because it's relatively harmless. But this time, I had a gut feeling. So I called the police. If anything, they could get the guy for illegally dumping trash from a barbecue or whatever. While I'm on the phone with dispatch, I put my dog inside to cut down on distractions while the officers investigated. A few minutes later, an officer arrived and I crossed the street to meet him. Gave him a description of the events, and pointed out which of the trucks the man had tossed the bags. He found the bags, he took photos, he put on gloves and told me to stay back. The bags were tied in a knot at the top, and it took him a minute to untie one because of the gloves and how tight the knot was. But eventually he got it open, looked inside for a few seconds, then twisted it closed, and took a few steps back. Shit, he hissed under his breath.
What?
I asked. It's a body. I felt sick. I could tell he felt sick too. I saw him grow pale. His hand was trembling when he held the radio. Even his voice was shaking as he gave the code to dispatch. The dispatcher sounded confused when she asked him to repeat it. Within 10 minutes, the county sheriff was on the scene. Even he looked sick at the contents of the bag. The coroner arrived 10 minutes after that, and the first officer walked me to the back of the house, along with another one who arrived later, at the same time as the coroner. Though I showed the first cop via the app on my phone when I described the events initially, I now show them the video on a larger screen. The camera caught footage of the truck as it drove by both times, as well as pulling into the parking lot, though unfortunately not a clear view of the license plate or of the man that tossed the bags out of frame. We watched the footage over and over, pausing frames, the officers taking notes. Ultimately, they requested this footage as well as a copy of the files from the past week to see if the truck had been in the area before. I've also been saving footage until the road department installs their own camera this week. Because this is still fresh, I don't know many more details. I know the body was in pieces, but I don't know the age of the victim, the gender, cause of death, any of that. Information hasn't been released to the public. I don't know if the coroner has even been able to identify the body yet. A police cruiser has been parked at the fire department next door for constant surveillance in case the guy comes back. The guy who dumped the body was likely a local. How else would he know he could dump it there? He probably thought it would get buried in other people's illegal trash accumulated over the holiday weekend, and that the sanitation crew wouldn't have bothered to investigate. When I think about how this guy lives in my community, it makes me feel physically ill. To think that he had clearly scouted the area for a dump site, that it may not have even been the first time this has happened, that this could be happening again. If I hadn't have called it in, if I hadn't been in the backyard at the exact moment, or if I had ignored that gut feeling, the victim would have never been found, may never find potential justice. Their loved ones may never have closure. In fact, there's a possibility that it might just happen again to another poor soul. I hope it's not me. Dear God, please don't let it be me. I think it's time I moved again. Third time's a charm, right? Update. Temporary housing acquired. Moving out. If you're enjoying this video, consider giving it a like. Now on to the next story. Written by Rep143. A family camping trip, how exciting. But the location they chose has an eerie past, as they'll soon discover. I posted this in Missing 411, and in my planning of my upcoming camping trips, felt the urge to post it here too. Mostly a copy-paste with an update on one of the family members. This may be a ramble of thoughts, but after recently stumbling on the sub, I finally felt like I found a place I could offer something. Something that my family and I experienced a few years ago, that to this day gives me a shiver. I've been camping solo backpacking and hunting my whole life in Oregon, and felt comfortable in the woods and have a deep respect for nature. A few years ago, my wife, daughter, and 2 German shepherds went camping north of Mount Jefferson, Oregon. I have included the coordinates of our campsite, which we found to be the perfect setup for us and our 2 dogs, who need their privacy since they're intimidating to other dog owners, and can be loud when spooked. It was not an established campsite, just a nice horseshoe off a USFS road that had flat ground full trees and a fire pit. The first night my daughter wanted to sleep by herself in a 2-man tent right next to ours. It was maybe 2 feet away from me and my wife's tent. We made the male German shepherd sleep, Guts is his name, with her in the tent. That whole first night, neither my wife and I could sleep. We both heard footsteps and they were very heavy, not like typical forest critters scampering around the night. I was well armed because I was paranoid from reading recently before departing about a dad in California who was shot and killed in a tent next to his 2 infant daughters. Needless to say, both my wife and I had 2 pistols and my rifle with me. The dogs are great at detection, and that is why I felt my daughter could sleep alone, because Guts is completely fearless and nothing would lay a hand on her without a battle to the death. All in all, nothing but bad vibes and loud footsteps occurred that night, which I ultimately decided was deer or maybe some elk. Day 2, morning. We go for a walk down the road, and maybe 300 feet away, the circle area in the photo, I see an abandoned road where a rusted gate post, gate was missing, was covered in vegetation. Something of the blue color caught my eye, and Guts immediately took off running down this abandoned road. My heart began to race because I think it's another family camping like us, and he's going to get himself shot or scare some innocent people to death. So I chase after him as fast as I can, and the rest follow. He stops after 20 feet into the road, and me yelling his name. But I have covered just enough distance to see that there is nobody there, and something is off about the sight. I yell, "Hello, is anyone there? Sorry about the dog." I got no response. My curiosity gets the best of me, and I have to see what the site conditions are. As I got closer, I knew something was wrong. It had all the necessities for a campsite, including a cooler, propane burner, tent, blankets, foldable table, but every single item had been completely destroyed, smashed and torn from what appeared to be claw marks. We all walked around in circles, puzzled by why anyone would leave all their camping gear behind, including an expensive REI tent. I figured, well, someone left in a hurry and animals got to the rest as the only logical explanation. Still, a propane tank and cooler were flattened by something, and it certainly wasn't a snowpack with the tree coverage in that spot. As the afternoon rolls in, me and my daughter are playing bokeh-ball at the campsite, and my wife goes walking by maybe 70 feet north to do her business. I do not have direct line of sight on her, but all of a sudden I see Guts make a mad dash straight towards her. Normally he would always be with me unless he was called over, and she didn't call for him. His speed and focus caught my attention, and I knew something weird was happening, so I ran over there and my wife started jogging at me, and I immediately drew my pistol. Guts had completely continued running into the forest, another 100 feet maybe, before I called him and he stopped. My other dog, Leia, who never misses the opportunity to be the pack leader, is not taking points. I've had her for 7 years now, and this was the first time in her life she refused to leave my daughter's side. She was fully raised and attached to us at the hip. Again, anytime we hike or play, Leia is up front, bossing everything in her path, and pauses to look to see where we are, and then continues. I asked my wife what happened, and she said, "I was trying to pee, and all of a sudden I felt all my hairs rise. I know someone was watching me, and then I saw Guts running towards me, and I just got up to move towards you." We spent 10 minutes looking for signs of anything and saw no trails, broken branches, nothing to point to what and where something went. We decided we are spending one more night since it's too late to pack up and drive, but we'll all be in the big tent together. Before we go to bed, I put a rope with a makeshift coin alarm around the perimeter of our campsite. I used a mint can and some coins and keys from our truck and zip-tied it so anything hitting the rope gave a little jingle. Very unsophisticated, but it put my wife at ease. As I go to tie my last corner off at a tree near our tent, our third mystery item unveils itself. It looks like someone has done the exact same thing I have done, with a rope that was so old and brown I didn't even see it at first. It was broken and only a few pieces remain, but sure enough, it was tied at roughly the same height, 8 to 10 inches off the ground, and even had a few rusted washers on it. I immediately felt someone has stayed here before and put the same makeshift warning system on the same tree I am maybe 10 to 15 years ago based on the condition of the rope. Perhaps my paranoia has now reached a new height, but in my mind I had to make sure the girls felt we are safe. And at the time, the only thing I could think of was when the evening came around, I made them sit in the truck and I fired a clip off of my .45 into the dirt as a signal to whatever was out there that we are armed. I reassured the girls that anybody listening to that now knows we have 2 wolves and are armed, and we are just too risky of a target so we can sleep safely. That night, we heard no footsteps, and the dogs never perked up and barked. We left early the next morning. Fast forward to today, and I watched the Amazon Missing 411 hunted documentary, and I noticed a cluster smack dab close to where we camped that weekend, and a flood of dread rushed me as I think of that mysterious abandoned campsite with the ripped tent and smashed cooler and cooktop. We have been camping since and have enjoyed the beauty of North Washington, but there was something there at that place that possibly took or harmed someone else less than 300 feet away from where we camped, and we thank our lucky stars that Guts was doing his thing so well that afternoon. Update from original posting. Guts is sadly no longer with us. He has journeyed into the next phase, and there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about him and how he saved us. He was a warrior, and his new brother Geronimo has a spirit.